Okay, so there should be a roster going around. If you want CE credit, your name needs to go on the roster. We're giving 2 hours. We're giving 2 hours away today. Right? I wish it was core. It's not core, but it's still 2 hours of CE. If you're online on Zoom, what we're going to need from you to get CE credit is we need you to, in the chat, put your name, and if you know your license number, your license number. If you don't know your license number for either the roster or online, if you print legibly, we can find the roster number, but you have to use your actual name. So if you go, your name's Sam Bell, but you go by Jimmy, okay, it's not going to work if you write Jimmy. We need Sam Bell. Okay, so once we got some more people coming in. Welcome, welcome. And then at the end, we will give out certificates if you're live and if you want them for your records. So today we are going to talk about how to read the PR. Oh my gosh, I've never done this before. How embarrassing. We're going to talk about how to read the PR. Before I start, we've got a special guest in here. This will allow me time. This is a good stall tactic. If you want to come up and introduce yourself, special guest. Jim Hogan, the special guest.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jim Hogan. I know some of you. I've met a lot of you, actually, but I'm with Inspiro Financial. And food for thought. I'll just give you one thing that we're watching. I'm watching closely right now in the mortgage industry, and that is interest rates. Interest rates have been really low over the last year. As you know, COVID kind of pushed interest rates down really low, which was great. You know, it's awesome. Low rates are great. It's exciting. This year, rates have crept up a little bit. Interest rates for, you know, someone with a good credit score, with a down payment, right around 3%, 2.8, 3%, 3.1, depending on their credit score. But at the beginning of the year, all through last year, they were down into the twos, 2.5, up, 2.6, 2.7. They've crept up a little bit, not a lot. They're still really good. But what we're watching right now, and all you got to do is turn on the computer. The news is talking about inflation. Things are, prices are going up. Everything's expensive, are going up, becoming more expensive. And because of that, interest rates will probably go up with inflation, So just keep that in mind. I think by the middle of the summer to the end of the summer, you'll probably see rates go closer to 4%. Maybe not, I could be wrong, but that's kind of what we're seeing and what we're hearing. So if we can answer any questions, if you need any help, we're downstairs. We'd love to help you. Thanks.
Thanks, Jim.
Thanks. And Jim is awesome. And Cynthia that's down there is amazing too. She pulled off some great things for a lot of people in not the best situations. So they're great.
Our underwriter.
Yeah. So
Awesome.
they're really great down there.
All right, well, let me get this.
That's a little bit out of focus.
Is it out of focus?
Just
Let
could
me
be
make
my
it big.
eyes.
And then we can see if I can make it big. Screen share.
Just the teensy bit on the small writing. It's hard.
It is, yeah. Technical difficulties.
All right, so
Does that work? A little fuzzy, but
is that better?
Yeah.
Kind of?
kind of.
No, I have my glasses on. I can't tell. All right, so it's always fuzzy to me.
I'm in the same boat. So if we're
I know.
it's fuzzy, I'm like,
I'm like that third grader that's like, I have glasses, I just don't wear them because I don't want to look like I have glasses. And actually, it has nothing to do with that. I'm just that lazy. All right, so I'm Sam. If I recognize most of you, but my name is Sam Bell. I'm the president of the Everest Group. That's my current job, but I also am a licensed title officer, a licensed escrow officer. I am the licensed title officer for North Star, I mean, I guess you could call and say, do my escrow, but I would fail miserably because apart from knowing the laws and the rules and passing a test, I don't really know anything about how to actually close your deal. So don't call me for that. In my prior life, I was a practicing attorney. My prior life before that, I was a real estate agent. So I am on my third career, like a loser. In fact, I was watching a show with my son. It was about a guy in his 40s who was changing careers. And I said, oh man, son, you don't want to be that guy. Like, don't be that guy. And he looked at me and goes, Dad, you're that guy. Okay. Anyway, so when I practiced real estate, I did a lot of litigation. It was all focused on real estate specific stuff, transactions, licensing issues with agents, brokerage problems, all kinds of different things. And then I practiced general counsel, where I worked with brokerages on their operational issues, on growth, mergers, acquisitions, things like that. And then George came to me one day and said, hey, you're doing a good job for us as our attorney. You want to join us and be our president? And something said yes. And then I'm here 2 years later doing this. And that's who I am. And we've got Crystal Cruz here. She is a licensed escrow officer that does know how to do escrows, unlike me.
I do.
But she has a lot of years. So why don't you introduce yourself? And then
So I'm Crystal. I am lead escrow officer downstairs at North Star Title. We're doing this for about 14 years, 4th generation of business, and technically my whole life I've been doing this. I did try to escape for about 2 years, and I worked for Merrill Lynch in finance. Wasn't my thing, and I just got drawn back into title and escrow. I can do everything for you guys, so everything from land, commercial, new builds. I have that knowledge and bandwidth. Also, our team has other really great players. We have Team Nick that's down there. They have about 7 years total of experience on their team. They're wonderful. Their kind of niche right now is the buyer market. So they help your buyers really well down there. We have Kim, who is our CEO and owner, and she is 30 plus years in the business. So she's fantastic. We have a great, solid title team too. But we're here for you always to answer your questions, even if you're not using us. Of course, we love that. But even if you're not, we're here to support you because we are one team here with Century 21.
awesome. So I'm going to hit it again because I know you guys want CE credit. If you haven't filled out the roster, make sure you put your name in on the roster. If you're online and just joined us, make sure you type in the chat box your name and license number. And if you can't remember your license number, but you know your name, as long as it's legible, Ryan right here will find your license number. I am writing checks that he has to cash. Okay, so let's talk about title and escrow. When I was first licensed, this was the most confusing part for me because I knew we needed it, but I didn't really understand why. And then when I got into my first deal, which was my second to last deal, I got a copy of the PR and it had a lot of words on it, a lot of words. And that's about all I really understood about it. I really was not well trained. I didn't really know what I was doing. All I knew is I needed to take this packet of information with a lot of words, big sounding words like easements and things, and hand it to my client. And then, of course, what happens when you give something to your client? They look at you because you are the expert, and they go, "I know. What do you want me to do with this? What do you think?" Right? That's where our expertise needs to come in. So the objective we're trying to accomplish today is, one, give you a little deeper insight into title and escrow. I see Leah sitting up front, who's a veteran of the industry and probably knows and forgot more about this than I'll ever learn. But hopefully we can even give the vets something that's good to look at. I like to, when we teach courses, I like to be very practical. I really want you to walk out of this today. And when you get that PR on your next deal, you go, oh, I know exactly what to do with this. I'm going to kill it. We're going to talk a lot about how you advise sellers, how you advise your buyers, what to do on both sides. Okay, so let's dive in with some of the basics. Here we go. Oh, we're going to look at the parts of a preliminary title report. We're going to talk about what is escrow, what is title insurance, what types of policies are issued in title insurance. These 4 bullet points are going to go pretty quick because then we're going to dive into an actual PR. And it is messy, super messy. We called First American Title Insurance, the underwriter, and I had said, hey, we want the ugliest thing you've ever seen, and they sent it to us. And we're going to walk
Don't be
through it.
nervous. They all don't look like this. We just want to show you the
Yeah, we
worst
want to show you the
case.
worst case because we can talk through everything you're going to see in a title report with that. Talk about top 10 title issues and then do questions and answers. Please don't reserve your questions till the end. If you have a question as we go, raise your hand. We want to talk through it as it pops up. If you're on Zoom, you can either type of questions in the chat or you can unmute yourself and ask aloud. So
And then Ryan, as we go along, we have handouts for the in-person. So Ryan will drop the PDFs into the Zoom chat. So for those of you online, you can follow along with what we're reviewing.
all right, so let's look. A title report has 3 parts. Right, that big hairy packet with lots of big words has really 3 basic parts. Schedule A. Schedule A is the who, what, where, right? You're looking at who are the parties, what types of insurance policies are we talking about, and where's the property located. Super basic. When we look at an actual Schedule A, you'll go, oh, God. Schedule B1. These are the requirements or conditions to close, not to the lender, but to the title, to the escrow officer and the title company. So we'll look at B1. There is something you should look at as an agent, something you should double check on behalf of your client. But for the most part, Schedule B1 is really the instructions to the title company. And then you have Schedule B2, and this is where it gets exciting. This is all the violence and sex and drugs. This is where you want to spend your time, and you see the words like easements and covenants and all that stuff. And liens and all of these big legal Latin words. This is the part your clients are going to care the most about, right? And we'll get into that. Like I said, we have the ugliest thing I've ever seen. We're going to look at that together. But this is the part really from the title company side, the escrow officer side. One of the things they do is they work to clear title. These are all the things they're working on, either clearing or not clearing, so that your client knows, hey, I'm getting my piece of property and it's subject to certain things. And there's certain things that just cannot be cleared off title through the closing process. And we'll dive into that.
And a quick note, if you use us at Northside, I'm sure other platforms do too, we'll send you a summary of the title report in our email. So when key points that are in there are going to be basically in the B2 section, because those are the things that have drawn to your attention, like a lien or anything like that. Again, we'll review what that section entails. But typically when you get that summary, that's the section that they're talking about in those emails. Okay,
so let's go on. So escrow, what is it you do other than, as agents, we know that you guys make all the money. Apart from that, what do you do?
Okay, so I do have a brief handout for you guys to review later on, but pretty much what escrow does is we make sure that we are the neutral third party of the transaction. So we hold everybody accountable to protect the buyers and sellers of the transaction. So sometimes maybe you clean your butt because we need to make sure that you're doing your job correctly. I apologize in advance because we can be sticklers. We make sure that we have, we make sure that title is clear. So that means we collect all the clearing information.
Everyone, it's the best.
We're trying to fix the in-person guys on Zoom.
Almost see that. So.
That's about as good as it's gonna be. Okay, sorry.
It's okay. So we will collect all the information that's needed to clear title. So we'll collect the HOA information for you, and we'll collect any of the payouts for the lenders. If there's liens on the property, we'll double check to make sure that they're actual liens against our party, because there are things called name matches that can come on the PR. So let me verify that using their social, their date of birth, and then we'll kind of bring those to your attention. So one of the things I look out for in escrow is if I see a PR that's really messy in that B2 section and they end up being name matches, I'll let you guys as agents, hey, your sales price at $300,000, like your seller has like $350,000 in liens and encumbrances. We need to make sure that he can bring to the table. Because the worst, the hate for you guys as agents, have your seller be blindsided, hey, you have to bring $50,000 to the closing table. So we just make sure to keep you guys informed and up to date. Again, the normal things will say, hey, so here's one loan to pay off, cool, we're good. But that is mainly our job when it comes to the PR. Just make sure when we transfer title, it is pretty and there are no issues. And then we also handle funds too, but we're talking about PR today.
So I think we covered all that.
Yeah.
Does anybody have any questions on what escrow does?
It's not very different from title, but there's a pretty interchangeable.
Yeah,
That is a
so
great question.
just in case we have people in California, in the state of Utah, it is one and the same. And then in California, it is separate. So here in Utah, it is kind of interchangeable. So our title department does a search and informs us of what needs to be cleared. In California, again, they do the same thing. They inform us, but we actually don't do the clearing of the title. We collect information, hand it off to title. So in escrow here in Utah, we have we're a lot more hands-on in that clearing process to make sure that it's all cleared up. And then of course we do all the closing, handling of funds, and the reporting. Again, California, it's just a little bit separate, that fine line. So they just have a different department that issues out the PR, the CPL, and those kind of things.
I don't think we have anybody from California on this thing.
Yeah.
So
That's good.
it's a great question. Title, think of title, and we're going to go on title. Think of escrow as the people that handle the money in the documents. Okay, that's what your escrow officer is doing. They're in charge of the money in the documents and the accounting. The title side is in charge of an insurance policy, and that's really what. And here we say title, and Chris talked about, in other states they've separated the two companies and the roles. You go to an escrow company and you take care of that. Nobody ever goes to the title company because it was last time you went into an insurance agent's office to do anything, right? But here we say it's title. We're going to title. We're going to go to the title. The title side of that is really just preparing and selling an insurance policy. Okay, and so what is title insurance? It's like any other type of insurance. You're basically paying a premium to a third party to protect something, right? And the title insurance policy is designed to protect your property rights. So, most of our clients, they're making one large investment. Some of us work with investors and they're savvy and they buy stuff all the time, and that's great. But the average Joe who's buying property, this is their largest investment in life. They are borrowing more money than they make in a long time to buy something, right? They want to make sure that it's protected so that one day they're not just laying in bed and somebody knocks on the door and goes, hey, great news, I actually own this house. What are you doing here? Get out, right? You don't want that. And what title insurance does is it protects those property rights so that when they move in, they know this is my house. The other thing it does is it protects, we'll just get these all up here.
I'll show him the door.
The other thing it does is it protects against covered protects against covered title defects. So what's a title defect? I mean, we're talking about things like liens and other things that affect the property. So, for example, somebody walks in and goes, "You're in my house, get out." You go, "Well, I bought this house. I don't know who you bought it from, but it wasn't me, and I'm the owner." And look at title, right? Title defects would be things like easements that you didn't know about, liens that weren't discovered, things like that. And so we're all are talking the same language. I'm going to pause. I'm going to say lien a lot. I'm not talking about skinny. Talking about liens, which are encumbrances or they're issues on title that usually deal with money, right? So if you owe me money and I have a lien right on your property, I can file a lien. I don't have to release that lien until you pay me the money, right? And if you don't pay me the money, then guess what? I can foreclose on your house, right? So liens typically go hand in hand with foreclosure rights. So a covered title defect might be a lien that has an issue or something. It protects against past problems. Okay, so things that happened in the past and will arise in the future. So that's what a future claim is, meaning, So I filed a lien against the house that you bought 10 years ago. Right? Well, you buy it, so 10 years passes, you buy it, and then I file a foreclosure 3 more years in the future. That's what it protects against, stuff like that. So past problems and future claims. Title insurance is, well, we'll hit it here. There's two policies that we usually talk about and that home buyers usually buy. One is the loan policy. You only buy a loan policy if you're not paying with cash. And lenders policies or loan policies are typically required by your lender, right? So if you're getting a government product or a conventional type loan, the lender's going to say, hey, yes, we will give you this money, but you have to buy a loan policy at closing. And the loan policy protects the lender against title defects, issues that can affect the mortgage, and it's effective for the life of the loan. So you're buying a policy, if you have a 30-year mortgage, you're basically buying a 30-year insurance policy to protect the lender, not the buyer, okay? The other type is an owner's policy. And again, it protects the owner against those title defects and issues that can affect their ownership rights. And it's effective, it's effective for as long as that person owns the property. And if they die while still owning the property and their estate takes over, it protects their heirs as well. So it's a very long-term policy. Now that doesn't mean that you buy a policy for your life, and if you sell your house, like what is the average, 7 years? You sell in 7 years, you get some sort of refund for the difference. You just buy the policy. And so those are the two policy types. So when you're working with a buyer and they're wondering, what is all this closing cost stuff you guys are talking about, right? You go, well, you're gonna borrow money, and so there's gonna be a lender's insurance policy you've got to buy, and then you're gonna want to buy an owner's insurance policy to make sure you're safe as well.
And then a quick note, what I've been seeing recently too, sellers are doing a lot of online reading, or they're hearing these like infomercials about extended policies. And what is that? What is this really? What am I doing? What am I paying for? Well, when you Google owner's title policy, it is an optional item in the state of Utah. So in section 6.2, it is written in there that they're going to be paying for the owner's title policy, but it is something to negotiate out of the contract. So if you have a seller that is consistent on that, I'd highly encourage your buyers to purchase the owner's title policy. Again, because we'll go through why it's really important to have it. But that is something that I've been noticing a lot, kind of bring it to your guys' attention. If they're complaining about the pricing, so typically downstairs at North Star, unless it's a neat and balanced property, there's 3 policies that we can issue. We always quote the middle policy. So we do have one more that we can write down. So if they're being finicky about numbers, we're willing to work with you, but I just noticed a lot of the sellers Googling and questioning that policy right now.
Interesting.
Yeah.
The cheap policy is like cheap auto insurance, right? It's going to cover very little.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, I've had 2 closings in the last week that have questioned it. So yes.
I just think it's important, this part, because so many times over the years I've had, sellers say, well, I'm not going to pay for title insurance because I remember I paid for that when I bought it. So the buyer should have to buy it. Yeah. And they're not understanding that there's actually normally 2 different policies. The one they paid for when they bought it was to protect the lender.
Mm-hmm.
And now, and likely the seller had to pay for one to protect them.
Yeah.
Sure.
So kind of drawing that distinction helps those sellers understand.
It does. And I have a lot of tools too that defines what each one is. So if you have a client that's questioning, let me know and I can send over. The difference is it's more in like layman's terms, so they can understand really what they're buying and the reason why behind it.
All right, so let's jump on. Let's get into the fun part, reviewing the preliminary title report. So we're going to go over again the big parts, because once we dive into this, we're going to get lost in all of the details. Schedule A, the who, what, where, right? Schedule B1, instructions to the title company. Schedule B2, the real sexy stuff that your client wants to know about, because it affects what they're buying and how they can use their property, okay? So this is Schedule A. Good old Schedule A. See, I told you, it's just a lot of words that mean nothing. So here's, it's the who, what, where, right? So right here, this is an owner's policy. So what number 2 is the kinds of policies that insurance policies, the kinds of insurance policies that are going to be purchased. In this, there's just an owner's policy. ALTA is something, it's an acronym you're going to see over and over again when you're working through the closing and title insurance process. And really all it is it's a big organization. Think of the NAR for realtors, right? There's this big organization and they work on all kinds of different things. ALTA is that big organization for the title companies. An ALTA owner's policy is if insurance is a contract, right? I hope you've never read a policy. They're so boring to read, but it's a big contract. ALTA wrote the form contract. So basically you're just saying, hey, this is a form policy and it's the standard in the industry. An ALTA policy is the standard in the industry. So you have an owner's policy, so we know this is going to protect the buyer, right? The amount, the typical amount of insurance would be the purchase price, right? You're going to insure for the purchase price of the property and then the premium, how much your client's going to have to pay, right? So if your seller is going to be paying closing costs or, you know, buying a policy for the owner, this would factor into your seller's net, right? You go, oh, okay, you're making some concessions. You're gonna, if it's on the buyer side, that the buyer's going to cover this, they're going to know, okay, so there's about 2,800 you're going to have to bring to closing, or you're going to see it on the closing disclosure or the settlement statement. That's for the owner's policy. This was a cash deal. If there was a loan, there would be a lender's policy here. The amount of the lender's policy of insurance would be the amount of the loan, okay? And then the premium, whatever the premium that's attached to that. So you look at that, and this will help educate you on what your clients are going to have to pay at closing. Now, one thing to just look at when you get this is make sure the amounts look accurate, right? If you've written if you're under contract for $200,000 and you see an $800,000 insurance amount, they are way overinsured, and that number for a $200,000 policy is way less than $2,800. I don't know what it is exactly right now because they're always in flux, but so you just want to verify, okay, that matches what we're under contract for, that matches what the purchase price is going to be on the owner's policy. That's what somebody's going to have to pay at closing. If there's a lender's policy, the amount matches what your client is going to borrow. It all looks good. Next thing you want to look at down here. Now, there's the loan. There's nothing there. You go down here, proposed insured. See here it says to be determined. This is an investment property, and so the buyer was figuring out what entity they wanted to put the property in. When you're working with this and you're working with a buyer, on the buyer side, the proposed insured is going to be your buyer. Now, a couple of things when it comes to buyers. A lot of us work with individuals who are buying property for their own personal use, right? And typically, it's going to be, your client. And if they're married and they want to take title in both their names, you need to make sure both their names are listed. If they're not married and they're just partners and they want to take it, make sure it's listed. If they're buying it through a trust or to be held in the name of a trust, or they're buying it in the name of a company, make sure that's the name of the trust or the company. Which, here's the easy thing, should be the same name that signed the buyer broker agreement. If it's not, there's a guy named Matt Barton and another guy named Rob Oakey and another guy named Ken Avery who will have some heart palpitations if you don't have a buyer broker signed in the name of the right buyer. Okay.
And a quick note, if anything fluctuates, if you add a buyer or move a buyer, or if your price changes, title should be sending an updated PR, so that way your file is accurate at the end of the transaction. And then, so another thing too is I've noticed a lot lately where the buyer is getting their loan in their individual names and they want to go into their trust after closing. So the PR will reflect them as individuals, and then there'll be what's called an accommodation after to accommodate it. So In that case, the final title policy will then show, which you won't ever see. But that's where a slight discrepancy could lie in that situation.
That's a good point. Thank you.
Yeah.
And then number 3 is how they're going to take title, right? Let's go back to real estate school when we learned about different ways to hold title. You have fee simple absolute. There's fee simple determinable. There's fee simple conditions and subject to condition precedent. There's all kinds of fee simple types, right? When it says fee simple, that just means you're buying it and you're going to own it. You're going to own it, the ground underneath the structure. You're going to own the airspace above it. You're going to own everything that's attached to the ground, all of the fixtures, right? So fee simple. If you're doing a deal that is like a life estate or a lease that requires an insurance policy, you are way in the advanced side of real estate. But for your purposes, typically it's always going to be simple. And then here, number 4, this should say your seller's name. This is who the seller is. So let's see, number 2-ish here, the proposed insured is your buyer's name, your lender's name, your seller's name. They just put fee title owner, right? But you should see the seller's name there. If you're not seeing the seller's name there, red flag, right? Red flag, because who are we actually under contract with and how do they connect to what the title company is saying is the owner of the property, okay?
And then, so if title sees that your seller has signed an individual name, but they're actually owning the property in an entity, so a trust or an LLC, we'll bring it to your attention because the PR is going to reflect the current owner. Also, some red flags that I see. So let's say that and there's successor trustee. I'll bring that to your attention. Like, hey, was someone deceased? These are all important things that title needs to know. So if you know that the current owner of the property is deceased, then that is information to provide to us. Then we're going to require a list of documents in order to make sure that the title is transferred correctly. And then also, if
okay, have any of you had that issue where, yeah, I was like, if you've been around, you're going to have that pop up one day where the heirs are trying to list the house with you because they own the house, right? Why? How do they own the house? Because they're the heirs to the owner. Right? That's how they connect it. Yeah. When I was practicing law, I would have to file probate actions. I would get hired all the time by sellers to file probate actions because what would happen is a week before closing, the heirs would go in, say, okay, we're ready to close. And the title company go, and who are you? Because according to the title records, you're nobody. They say, well, but mom died, I'm the heir. They'd say, not until a court says you're the heir, right? So I would have to go to court and get title cleaned up so that they could close. It's really important to know. And what's interesting, when you talk, when you first meet with, a seller in a listing appointment, they're never going to say, hey, I don't actually own the property, it's my mom, she died. If that happens, that is a home run for you because you're going to be able to address it before you even get the thing on the market, right? Traditionally, what happens is, since I'm the heir, like I said, I'm the heir, so I know I own it because mom died and I was listed in the will, or there was no will and I just know I'm the only child. So I own this because I'm the heir, right? It won't be until you get the title report and you go, hold on. You're Sam, this says Frank. Is your real name Frank? No, that was my dad. Okay, where's your dad? Oh, he died. All right, now we got to get this cleaned up so that it says Sam, right? And then I can sign. So
that's why it's super important too. As soon as you have a listing contract with the seller, open it with title, because then if these issues come up, you have the time, the ability to address it before it goes under contract. So again, I stress that a lot when I come into your classes. Just as soon as you have an agreement, open it, and we can start the process. Because you never know, and you'll see. And as crazy PR, you never know what's going to happen sometimes. So just keep that in mind.
So that's schedule, last thing in Schedule A is just the description of the property. That's usually a part of Exhibit A. That's going to be the legal description. You're not going to flip over to Exhibit A and see the address. You're going to see either lot number, blah, 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 of this subdivision, or you're going to see some meets and bounds description that starts with beginning at a point that's and a whole bunch of numbers and symbols. So that's Schedule A. Any questions on Schedule A? I know when I sold this, it seemed very simple, but there are things you need to watch for. All right, Schedule B, Part 1. Again, instructions to the title company. A lot of this stuff is what I call boilerplate. It's in all of the PRs that we see, that you're going to see. A couple of, just one place you look is typically it says the parties' names again. Just double check, right? Double check the names are correct. Outside of that, again, this is instructions to Crystal and to the title company on what they need to do to get things set up to actually issue a title insurance policy. Okay, here's the fun part, the sexy part. Schedule B, Part 2. All right, so let me put this down. There's actually many pages of this. Here is kind of the general breakdown. As I think of Schedule B, Part 2, in my mind, I break it down into really 3 sections. Section 1, I call the boilerplate stuff. It's the stuff that's in every PR all the time. And the boilerplate stuff always comes first. In contracts, boilerplate stuff usually comes last. In the PR, it comes first, right? And it's this stuff, right? It's all the big sounding legal words. That's the boilerplate stuff. I don't spend a lot of time. I'm going to point out the stuff you should think about. I don't typically spend a lot of time going through the details of this. I don't think you need to spend a lot of time going through the details of this with your client unless, okay, you'll see here, unpatented mining claims. If your client's buying a piece of property because they're going to prospect for minerals on it, and mining is a big deal to them, then pay attention to this, right? Ask questions. If your client is just buying a house to live in a house because that's the American dream, a lot of this stuff is not, it's not stuff you need to really worry about. There's mining claims, there's discussion of water rights. You know, there are some residential properties that have water rights. Now, water rights and water shares are different. There are more water shares out there than water rights. We know the difference. I know you're like, I didn't come here to learn about water law, Sam. I know you do. Right? Water rights means you actually personally have the right to either groundwater or the water. There's a stream behind us, Little Cottonwood Creek. You have rights that you own some of that water in that creek. Now, water shares means you are a shareholder in a water company that owns the actual rights to the water in that creek. I'll give you a very personal example to me. I own one water share in the Richards Irrigation Company. It's fantastic for me because I pay $200 a year and I can water my lawn 24 hours a day. I don't, but I could. It's very cheap. I used to have a house where I didn't have a water share. It was very expensive to water my lawn. But I own a share in a company that owns the water rights. Now, if you think about the rep C, that's got to be disclosed there, right? Are you buying water shares or water rights? Now, if it's in there, you need to double check some of this stuff. I'd be surprised if any of you ever do a deal with an old prospector looking to mine on his quarter-acre lot in Taylorsville. Could happen.
And then also here too, you'll see the special improvement districts. That's something to look out for too, because there most likely will be a transfer fee.
Yeah, we'll scroll down. We got a lot of that stuff on here.
Okay.
So next thing on this is the property taxes. The property taxes fall in the boilerplate category. Now, pay attention to that. I told you not to pay attention to this stuff. When you hit property taxes, pay attention. If you look at this one on number 8 at the bottom, general property taxes for the year 2020 are accruing as a lien, not yet due. You are going to see that all the time, right? Because we always have property taxes accruing. When you get nervous is when you start seeing old years. That means somebody hasn't been paying property taxes, okay? So here we have general property taxes for 2019 are delinquent, $20,000 owed plus, right? 2018 delinquent, another $7,500 owed plus, right? We have a tax certification from an improvement district due for another $1,800. Now, if you're on the buyer side, you're looking at this. And when I'm on the buyer side, if I'm looking at this stuff and I'm seeing delinquent, right? It goes all the way to the bottom of the page, delinquent. I'm starting to wonder, can the seller perform? What's the seller's net in this? Because if they don't have at least, let's see, 20 and 27.5, not 29.5, 30 something thousand to cover just number 8, then they're going to have to come with cash to the table. Are they going to actually be able to perform? If I'm on the seller side, I'm looking at this going, wow, remember that seller's net we did when I sat down with you in the listing appointment, all that money you were going to make? You forgot to tell me you don't pay taxes. So now we're going to have to take that seller's net from this much. It's going to start. It's the opposite of the fish story where the fish grows. You're starting to go the other way, right? It gets smaller and smaller. Now look at this. This goes on. 2016 is delinquent. There's special. They didn't pay their garbage bill for 2016, right? And just keep watching it shrink. Seller's net go away on the listing side. On the buyer side, I'm going, boy, I'm starting to get nervous. Are these guys really going to show up at closing? Am I really going to get this property? Okay. Crystal mentioned special improvement districts. That's number 9. It comes up there. Special improvement district. And if you don't know what a special improvement district is, basically a governmental tool that's used where only a few properties are benefited. So the government, the local government looks at those properties and goes, it's not fair to have money from the general property taxes be paid into the coffers and then paid out just to benefit 20 properties. So we're going to create a special improvement district. And those 20 properties are, in addition to their general property tax, they're going to have to pay a fee for the benefit the government's giving to them that no one else gets, right? They exist. How often do you see those on a PR?
There's Taylorsville, I think like every so often. Probably say 2 out of every 10.
Yeah, so this is going to be an exception to the rule. Yeah.
Like at what point in the transaction am I getting this? 'Cause, like this is kind of rough, like you're
Like,
at
holy
the
crap.
table, and then you're like, oh
Yeah.
yeah, you're
You-
actually-
So it's a fantastic question. I'm going to restate it. So just make sure everybody on Zoom heard it. At what point in the transaction do you get the title report? It is part of the requirements of the seller's disclosure. So if you're thinking of the real estate purchase contract, the very first deadline is
Like touch meat.
seller's disclosures in paragraph 7 is a big
Yeah.
list of stuff. Can you mute anybody on Zoom, please? It's a big list of stuff. I think a lot of times we think of seller's disclosure as really
Like this stuff.
property condition questionnaire, right? But it's much
Let me
more.
show you.
This is part of that packet. So
Tell me.
the seller is technically required to give this to the buyer, right? It's typically held through the agents and goes to the buyer. So it's very early, and a review of this is part of the buyer's due diligence right, something the buyer should be doing during due diligence to make sure that they're okay with stuff. I don't see some of these things that are nerve-wracking. So
So to verify disclosures too, timeline wise, 24 to 48 hours. You should be getting a copy of this.
So special improvement district, what that means for your buyer is you're gonna have a little extra to pay, right? You're gonna pay your property taxes and there's gonna be a little extra. And, the escrow officer, as they're working through the transaction and figuring stuff out, they're gonna contact the special improvement district and find out what that extra is, okay? And that's gonna be billed monthly, quarterly, annually. It just depends on the special improvement district. All right, so that's something you should go, okay, buyer, pay attention to this, right? Again, minerals, rocks, sand, stuff like that. If you're working with the old prospector, worry about it. If not, don't. There's the water rights. Rights of way for roads, ditches, canals, utility lines. Now this is all boilerplate stuff. If you have a client who's worried about the road crossing their land or something, then pay attention to that. When I say pay attention to it, it means, hey, Schedule B, Part 2 are the exceptions to the title insurance policy. So if you think about, let's just go back. I think we all have cars. Think about your auto owner's policy. There's a whole bunch of things that are excluded from coverage. I mean, even though I pay you X hundred of dollars a month so that you can insure my car if I'm in an accident and it happens to be a part of a terrorist attack. I'm using terrorist attacks because they are standard exclusions. So if Al-Qaeda runs a tank into my car, guess what? You're not going to get your car covered by insurance because acts of terrorism is an exclusion under your average auto owner's policy. Okay, so and you'll be on the news though, so that's pretty cool. So, but you're gonna have to buy another car out of your own pocket. So these are the exclusions. So if your client has concerns about roads, ditches, canals, when I say worry about it, that means call the title company and say, hey, there is a canal running across the back of my client's property. They're really concerned about what that means. With most insurance policies in this world, you can always get extra coverage, right? They call it riders, or they call it, what do you call it? Riders? Endorsements, thank you, endorsements. You can always buy extra to cover things that are excluded here. And that's something not a lot of residential real estate agents spend much time on, to be honest, is figuring out, okay, what really is the concern? Is there an endorsement or a rider that we could buy to make sure that concern's gone away? Now, you guys are all licensed to sell real estate. Doesn't matter if it's residential or commercial. If you're on the commercial side, spend a lot more time working with attorneys and the title company to make sure you have all the endorsements that your client wants to cover, right? Because on a commercial policy, things are a little more complicated. Okay, so we go down here. This is one to think about. A typical exclusion is boundary lines. Okay, if we were to turn around and look out the windows here, I can tell you there is a surprising number of boundary line problems all throughout the state of Utah. All throughout. The odds are where you live right now probably has a boundary line issue. Whether you care about it or not is a whole other question. Typically, when people go, do they get a survey as part of due diligence? No, because you go, why would I spend another $2,000 to get a survey? That's crazy, right? I see the fences. I'm good with that. Okay, and that's fine. That's great. Every house I've personally lived in has had boundary problems. Now, not like inches, like feet, because I have that survey every house I bought for me. Okay, and they're boundary. Now, what's interesting is when I would have a client, as an attorney, when I would have a client call me and say, hey, my neighbor's building a fence, it's on my property, or I just had a survey and the survey line is here and the fence line's over there, and I think my neighbor's squatting on 5 feet of my property. I want title insurance to come in. Title insurance does not cover boundary issues. And just so you know, it does not cover boundary line issues. Because again, not again, I'm going to say it for the first time, insurance companies don't like the bad bets, right? It's like casinos. The house always wins. They know that there are boundary line issues everywhere, and they don't want to be held responsible. However, if you have a survey, there are endorsements to cover that. So if your clients have issues or questions about boundary lines, again, contact the title company and talk to them, say what's available, because we're worried about potential boundary line issues. The odds are they'll have to get a survey and double check things, but then it can be covered. Okay, so again, boilerplate stuff. Right here, rights of way. Okay, let's see here. Oh, it is blurry, isn't it? Yeah. All right, so some other things you're going to see in these rights of way, right? Do you guys remember what a right of way is? It's the right for someone else to come across your property or to maintain your property. It's very similar to an easement, okay, which is the right of someone to maintain things on your property. These things cannot be done away with. And we're gonna see a lot more of these at the end. Typically, they put in the title policy, you have the boilerplate, then you have the money stuff. So it's really, really scientific and legal, the money stuff. And then I look at the stuff you can't do anything about. And that's typically at the end. In this policy, they fit a couple of them up front. They talk about in your boilerplate section, they'll talk about zoning issues. If there's anything related to zoning that's recorded on the property. Let's skip over to the next
Really
one.
quick too, if you do have a client that's worried about any of those, and if you see on here where there's an entry number, that means it's recorded, and I can provide you a copy. So your client can read through the document in regards to that easement or right of way to kind of see what it really means. The title can provide you those, we typically don't, but if they want it, we can provide them.
Awesome. You have things like maintenance agreements. This one has a stormwater maintenance agreement. It's going to be between other parties that have been recorded. These are all part of the boilerplate. Now let's get down here to 24. This is the money stuff. We just talked about Rob a second ago. Here. The money stuff, okay? This is what the escrow officer is really zoning in on, because these are the things that the escrow officer can work to get cleared before it closes. By the way, if we go back to Schedule B, Part 1, that's one of the instructions as a condition to close from the title company to, from the title insurer to the title company is get this stuff cleaned up, okay? Trust deeds, that's the main financing tool. So when I see trust deed, I go loan, okay? Now, if you think back to Schedule A, how much was the purchase price? $800,000. Look at this first loan. How much is it? $800,000. We just looked at over $30,000 in property taxes. That doesn't mean it's currently, that was the face value of the loan at one point. The escrow officer is going to call to figure out what the actual payoff is. But I'm looking at this and I go, whoa, that loan isn't that old, right? It's 4 years old. It was for 800. We got about 30. So if I'm on the buyer's side, I'm already nervous about how much in property tax. Now I see a big fat loan for the same value as the purchase price. I'm thinking, whoa, can this seller perform? Okay, then you go on.
Really
Yeah.
quick. For trustees, again, that breakdown we send you over the summary, we'll list out which ones are equivalent to pay off and which ones we need to clear. So if you ever see a trustee, if we tell you, hey, number 14, I don't know where we're at, but number 14 needs to be, is an old trustee that needs to be cleared. Eventually that will be cleared off the title. So
Without
in this
payment.
case, yeah, without payment. So in this case, these are all the owner of the property, but in not every situation is every single loan attached to your side. Most likely it is, about 98% of the time, but if there's an old trustee, don't be alarmed. We have the ability to clear it off and make sure that they're only paying for one loan on it.
It's a good point. So here, trustee, 166,000. If you're on the seller side, you're going, man, the net is just like vapor. Do you have a question?
Esquire.
Esquire, that is a fancy title for attorney. So Bruce is an attorney. Robert is also an attorney. I know some of these guys, unfortunately, but Esquire just means that they're an attorney.
Giving themselves
Yeah, only egomaniacs use it. So anyway. Yes, I make sure. Yes. Like you can, if you just call me that for the rest of the day, that'd be fantastic. So here we're looking at this. We got another loan, right? Again, if you're on the seller side, you're looking at this going, yikes, we may have a problem. I need to have a conversation with my seller to go, boy, I just looked at the title report. Haven't paid taxes in a while. A lot of loans. Like, you might have to bring money to close. Are we ready to do this? Are you there? On the buyer's side, I'm looking at it going, yikes, will they perform? It's not a bad time to talk to your client and just start to set the expectation. This is messy. There's a lot of money owed on this property. I'm a little nervous that the seller may not be able to perform. Would you mind if I just called the listing agent, said, hey, have you seen this title report? Are you as scared as I am? If not, why not? I'd love to know. Let's talk about it, right? This one goes on. Look, here's a construction deed of trust. Here's another deed of trust. Now look at these numbers, right? They're not little numbers.
Did you fabricate this or is this?
No, this is real.
Wow.
I'm going to pause for a moment and talk about the realness of this. About 3 weeks after they sent this to me, First American sent out a memo. I call it the Blacklist Memo. And we get them maybe once a quarter. And it basically says, here's someone, you cannot even insure them. If they walk in, don't even issue the preliminary title report. We will not insure them. Guess who showed up about 3 weeks after they sent me this? The guys, right? Yeah.
Did you have a question?
Some of the guys with Esquire behind their name.
Well, so all of these that we're seeing are current loans.
Mhm.
They're not
Current
like.
loans. Not the old stuff that's already
not
been
old
paid.
stuff.
Yeah, so in this case, they had to pay off all of it.
And this is how I know this and how she knows it. So the trust store, if we think about the deed of trust and the crazy names we use, we don't use borrower and lender, right? We use trustee, trustor, and beneficiary. The beneficiary is the lender, right? The trustor is going to be the seller, right? So if or the borrower. If the trustor's name is the same as your seller, that means it's probably an active loan. Mill Creek Cove Apartments was the seller on this one. And so we know, oh, that's another one for them. Mill Creek Cove, oh, that's another one for them, right? So unless they paid these off, which by the way, they haven't, because look what happens here. We have the loan. Okay, well, what's the condition of the loan? Oh, a notice of default has been filed. We all know what notices of default are. It's the first step in a foreclosure, which means these guys aren't so good at paying their mortgages, right? So this is not only, is it a big number, it's in distress. When I see notice of default, I think, oh, there's going to be extra, right? Because there's going to be extra interest. There's going to be late penalties. There's going to be trustees' fees paid to the attorney who's handling the foreclosure. All of that will factor into the payoff on this loan. You look down here, another loan. Look at this one. Do you guys remember the word Liz pendens from real estate school? It's Latin and it means pending litigation. That's another foreclosure. That's a different kind of foreclosure than the notice of default. Notice of default is known as a non-judicial, meaning you don't have to go to court. If you have a lis pendens, that means you're in a judicial foreclosure, you're in court. So you have pending litigation, right? So another one in distress, and this is a construction lien. Oh, let's go on. Construction lien, lis pendens. My question is, if they saw a checkbook, would they know what it is? I'm not sure. But as you go through this, you're going, wow. Wait, our under contract prices, our purchase price is 800, and I thought 30,000+ in property tax was going to be a problem, and now I'm looking at millions in loans that are in distress. Are we ever going to close this deal? By the way, the end of the story, it was never closed, and all those guys with Esquire and those apartments all got blacklisted from the title losses, right? So it's a mess, and I'm going, we're in foreclosure. Is there anything they've ever borrowed that's not in foreclosure? Okay, so this is the money section. Now you're going to see words lien, trust deeds. That's all dealing with money, right? Which means the escrow officer is going to get that all cleared off. So unless there's something obvious that says we may have a problem, we're going to look at it and go, okay, they've got that. Then you get down here, a certificate of non-compliance. Okay, this is the best title report ever to look at. Everything. Certificate of non-compliance is typically filed by the city code enforcement people. Say, hey, there is an actual zoning issue, like zoning non-compliant issue. Now, the escrow officer is really good at finding out how much money is owed and collecting and accounting for the money to pay it off, and then paying it off then making sure that everything's recorded to make it go away. Non-compliance is not something an escrow officer can do much about other than get a copy. And now, as a buyer's agent, I'm going to want a copy. Because I either need to negotiate this through the as a due diligence objection. Think of it as repairs. This might be something like, oh, there's a mother-in-law apartment that's non-compliant. So you want to get a copy of that, because if your client's looking at this house going, okay, it's a little over our affordability, but it has the mother-in-law, and so the rent's going to offset that. Perfect situation. Let's write an offer. And then you see this and you get a copy and it goes, unlawful mother-in-law, and the city's already aware that it's an illegal duplex and they're going to come in and shut that down. That ruins everything for your buyer, right? So you want to get a copy of that. Title can pull that for you. And then you want to give it to your client and go, hey, how are we going to fix it? Sometimes it's like a little fencing thing. The fence is a foot too high. Okay, seller, we want you to cut the fence down a foot or do something like something that can be dealt with. But if it has to do with the use of the property, your client's buying a commercial property and it's not zoned commercial, then it could be a deal killer.
So then I recently had one of the non-compliant brick steel that we closed.
I know.
So these can vary. So when I pull it, I will let you know. I'll obviously provide you a copy. I'll let you know. For example, this owner just enclosed his carport. So then I called the city and said, hey, what can we do? Because at this point it was in like legal action. So I called the county and the cities. What can we do? How can we get this done? So title will assist in the process. In his case, the seller was really nice and just took down the walls, and it made it really easy. Got the inspector out the next morning, and it was removed from the property.
She did all that. Make no mistake. She stopped selling it. She was a rock star in this, and it wouldn't have never happened unless you took care of it.
Thank you, Rick.
So thank you.
Yeah, so title will.
If you
help
want to learn
us.
how to sell, Rick's in the back.
See, whenever I walk around him, I don't have to talk. Do you have a question?
So you're talking about, so we'll see this, but it doesn't really
This one?
tell us like what the problem is.
Does not
So we
tell
say get a copy from you.
Yes, so
Yes.
I'll get a copy and I'll provide it to you. In his situation, it was an easy fix, but sometimes they'll require the seller to go in, file permits, file for approval, even though it's already been done. So they'd have to bring in, get someone to draw blueprints, a layout of whatever they built. So it could be more difficult than his situation.
So Sam.
Yeah.
What we're seeing more of homes that they finished their basements but never got permits.
Nobody
So-
does that in Utah.
We
We all hire.
That's the problem.
So
Hey,
that,
Right.
I'm gonna help for you.
so in this example,
Go on. This example.
in this example, where that would be the case, would it show up in that? Or if the city truly did have a problem?
The city knew about it. There would be a notice of
It would
non-compliance.
show up as a non-compliance.
Yes.
And
Yes.
then-
And
They would
then
have to bring the layout into the.
they would have to
city.
go kind of reverse building permit
Yeah.
the thing, which
So-
sometimes is not very easy to do.
So today, we're still not having too many issues with it, but 5-10 years from now, all of these finished basements that are done.
May
it might
become a
be-
problem.
It may have a problem.
But here's the reality of what you're talking about. The self weekend warrior finishing the basement without pulling building permits, having things inspected, just doing it. Is, you say 5 to 10 years from now, we may have a problem. They're everywhere. Remodeling is everywhere. The home weekend warrior, home improvement guy is everywhere. The only question is, does the city know about it? And the answer is no. But so yes, 5 to 10, it could be next year. Who knows when these get discovered.
Typically, when I see them, it's kind of viewable from the curbside. So they're driving by inspecting, they're like, yeah, that wasn't there before. Or if you add in a different entrance with like a section A of your property address, then that's kind of when it flags the city.
I
They
was-
won't really know about the basement.
I was talking to I was teaching this sort of somewhere else, an undisclosed brokerage location. And I had somebody raise their hand and they said, hey, I was just out on a listing appointment. It's the seller is a flipper and they added a second story and they don't want me to disclose, they don't want the buyer to know that they didn't pull permits to add the second story. You know, so when she said, when the code enforcement officer, the building inspector is driving down the road and sees the house that was 1 story is now 2, you might be a bit, no, you could have a problem.
I had one that had been done in 1964. I sold the property twice. On the 3rd round, where the other agent called up and said they had an issue with the basement. So what point is that triggered? Just when the city finds out, or the transaction typically doesn't?
Maybe when a survey is on the property and they're
When
looking
that's
at
the
it more in
maybe.
depth of the property.
So this,
Hard.
it does, it would likely, if it's a basement, be somebody reporting it or a building inspector driving by and seeing a bunch of wood out in the front yard going, this looks like something's happening that, and I don't have anything in my record saying that anything's been permitted to be done at that house. But it happens, it happens all the time. People get away with it all the time. And there are statute of limitations associated with that. The issues that you'll have a notice of non-compliance are where there aren't really statute of limitations would be use. So that illegal mother-in-law apartment. I mean, people like to say mother-in-law, and it's like, it's a duplex. That's what it is, right? It might be upstairs, downstairs, it could be side by side, it's a duplex. That there was a case in Provo where a BYU law student bought a house because she could afford the house because of the additional rent coming out of the basement. This was more years than I'd like to admit. It wasn't me. I didn't go to BYU. Yeah, no way. But I
represented the city.
it was the daughter of a partner of the law firm I was working at who bought it. And what happened is at that time, Provo had decided this is getting out of control. These mother-in-law basements that are being rented to students in their campus are getting out of control. We're going to start enforcing. And they could even, and she was issued a notice of non-compliance, was recorded on her property, and they started fining her till she could prove she had evicted, and not only evicted the tenants, but dismantled the second kitchen and taken down the door that created the mother-in-law apartment, right? She didn't want to do that because she couldn't afford to do that. And being a law student, you know everything under the sun. You're the world's smartest print people, blah, 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 blah. You're kind of like that 16-year-old teenager. You know everything. So she sued the city to say, I'm grandfathered in because this use of a duplex or a mother-in-law apartment has been going on since the 60s. And she went and talked to all the prior owners and they all gave testimony, say, yeah, duplex when I had it, you know, mother-in-law when I had it, all the way back. She said, there's a statute of limitations problem, meaning you can't enforce it because it's been going on too long. Or I was grandfathered, right? Because it started being used as duplex long before you said no duplexes in this area. She lost, and so again, being the world's smartest human, appealed, went to the Court of Appeals, and now we have law that everybody has to live by, which says when it comes to use, there's no such thing as grandfathering, and there's no such thing as a statute of limitations because it's what you're doing with it at that time, right? So it violates at that time. So she got a bunch of bad law created for all of us that we got stuck with. So thank you to the smart law students who think they know everything. So those use things, they don't go away. They just never go away. So, you know, I always watch I don't always watch, I don't search that often, but when I'm playing around in the MLS and I see mother-in-law advertised, I think, oh, somebody is going to get into something they may not know what to do. They may get in trouble for it. So anyway, that was a long discussion on notice of non-compliance. Let's move on. So this is a continuation of the stuff that to be paid. you see judgments, right? So title will search the judgment records because judgments can become liens on not just the real estate that the debtor owns, but on everything that they own. You have a question?
So I guess going back to the process of that, so like, I'm assuming you just have to go to the county and submit some formal, like, hey, I'm a contractor and I'm gonna do this work myself, and then they'll approve it?
You don't have to be a contractor, you just have to go apply for a permit.
And that's being like, get the permit, what's required.
Once you get the permit, to get the permit, typically they require drawings, plans. If it goes into structural areas, you may have to have engineered plans, meaning you had to have an engineer help draw the plans. You have to pay a fee, and then they know you're doing work. They're going to send out the inspectors to inspect if the work is done to code, right? And then they don't give you final permission until everything's done. So it's a process to make sure things are built safely and up to certain standards. Exactly. You're like, I know how to do electrical. Don't touch the two wires at the same time. This, I don't know why I have to pay this guy a bunch of money to do that, right? And I can go to Home Depot and buy all the stuff anyway. I do have clients, right there, say friends. You have friends, and self-proclaimed slumlords that are that smart at electrical, and they ran their own new service off of the power lines to the house without ever calling the power company, without ever touching the two lines together because they're still alive, and never telling the city they did it. And so, yeah, not an Esquire. The rest of the story, he is an electrical engineer, but he doesn't know a lot about electricity.
He's funny as can be.
As funny as can be, and he's cheap as can be. And Rob knows him too. I would never represent. Or in court. Or against the city. Because the city's right. Whatever. Yeah, you're probably right. Yeah, maybe. A bunch of stories. Wow. Bad. Yeah, so, but it happens all the time. I mean, if you want to get really technical, if you look at, if you pull, nobody wants to do it. I think I've done it, so there you go. I'm going to share with it. You pull the requirements for a building permit. There's a lot of like rumors or urban legends out there, like, oh, if work over $500, then that's not anything related to what really requires it. I mean, if you go into the city of Holiday, this is where I look. If you're going to replace a light fixture, right? Which I think as great as our hand and go, I know where the electrical panel is. I know how to turn off the breaker. I can do the two wire nuts and replace my own light fixture. Technically, you should get a building, right? And nobody, I mean, even electricians. I just had a bunch of electrical work done at my house. He didn't pull for anything. I don't live in the
That's also
Rob,
why
you
I
want to
said
sell my
to
house?
me, you have to let this curb viewable.
Yeah.
That's because,
Yeah.
you
There-
know,
there
I
are-
know you choose light fixture.
If there's a big rollaway dumpster out front, you know, that's a big sign. Might be your sign, right? If there's, yeah, stacks of lumber, electrical stuff everywhere. Okay. All right, so this is more stuff, judgments. They look at judgments to pay. This judgment. Yeah, more construction liens, private liens. It just goes on and on and on and on. Construction service liens, another judgment. Let's see, let's get to the stuff we can do nothing about. Yeah, it's bad. It's bad. Okay, so let's get down. Well, oh, no, where did it go? The stuff we can't do anything about. Go back. Oh, maybe that was before. Hang on. So the stuff you can't do anything about was before this. Sorry about that. It's usually at the end. Was before this. It's things like easements and rights of way, and covenants, conditions, and let's talk about the stuff you can't do anything about. You're not
Hey,
easement to go away unless you negotiate with the easement.
I'm not gonna do anything.
Okay.
You online, unless you have a question.
Yeah. So
Thanks, Ryan.
easements aren't going to go away. Rights of way aren't going to go away. Covenants, conditions, and restrictions. A lot of buyers have concerns about HOAs. because HOAs are rumored to be horrible Gestapo type organizations that ruin your property rights. And I want a couch on my porch because that's my right. I would never do that because I have taste, but I want the ability to do it because I'm a property owner, dang, right? And so if you have a client like that saying no HOAs and you get the title report and it says covenants, conditions, and restrictions, that's a red flag, right? And those aren't just going to go away. You're not going to be able to look at them and go, don't worry about it. This is a great escrow officer. I have stories about her from Rick, and like amazing miracle worker. And guess what? Well, she'll just make the HOA go away.
Yeah.
That's not how that works, right? Yeah.
More in-depth question. So CCNRs are put in place by most of the time the builder, right? Versus an HOA is like actively doing something HOA.
Yeah. So the covenants, conditions, and restrictions are usually created and recorded by the developer or the builder, right? An HOA is an organization that's described in the covenants, conditions, and restrictions to administer those. So they're basically charged with enforcing the contract, which
And they
is
can make their own rules, right?
they can make rules.
And sometimes you have CCNRs right away.
Yeah.
So-
Yes. And that's
another
becoming
thing
more
too.
and more popular.
Yeah, unless you're in Daybreak. Everyone in this room, just keep in mind, everyone in this room, Daybreak has a 0.5% transfer fee. Everyone forgets about it, but there's a high transfer fee on that one. But they'll have like a multiple lines for Daybreak.
It's an inheritance too, right? Inheritance is pretty bad.
Yeah, so typically the newer developments have those really high transfer fees and crazy HOAs where you can't fence this, color mix, that's the gray color in their color book. So
Yes.
They
But
don't always call it a transfer fee, though.
it's a notice of
community
reinvestment.
community.
Do you
Yes.
have any alternate, Ellis? I
Notice of
need something.
there are
Think so.
CCNRs
Not
without HOAs. Now, I was just approached the other day by someone who lives in a community that has CCNRs, but no HOA. Some of the neighbors have gotten together saying, hey, let's amend the CCNRs, create an HOA. And they came to me and said, hey, is this possible? And the answer is, yes, if you can amend CCNRs, you can create the organization to administer or enforce.
Did you look on the back here to see if it's,
I don't have anything.
look on your schedule?
Okay, so easements, if there's an issue with access to the property, sometimes you'll have a client that's looking at what's known as a flag lot or something like that, where, it's happening more and more in the older areas as we run out of land. House here, old house here, new house built in the backyard, right? And the driveway runs right up the side yard of the front house, the house with street frontage. The question. Share. At the
Nick,
question is, do you have rights to access your land? We want to make sure that it's not landlocked and that you can drive up to your house. The title company will help identify any access easements or things like that. So they're access issues, things like that. So, and that's where you get these easements and things. So if you see them, you just go, hey, client, these easement means somebody has the right to come across your property. Your client may want to see a map or something, some description of what that easement looks like. There's a house that's up by Bonneville Golf Course that has a sewer easement that cuts the house in half. How did they build a house right on top of an easement? Home Depot. No, I don't know. I don't actually know, but they did. And so, anytime that house is up for sale, a buyer has to ask themselves the question, do I want to pay $1 million because it's in the $1 million+ neighborhood? Do I want to pay $1 million+ for a house that one day a sewer company could come and say, sorry, I got to drive our bulldozer right through the middle of your living room because we got to get to that pipe that's under your house. It can be an issue, right? And it's something your buyer will want to know. A buyer, if you were a buyer, would you want to know where these easements are and how they affect me? I would. And so, it's not a bad idea when you see easements to go, okay, where are they and what do they look like? Okay. All right. Any questions on the world's most long and ugly Schedule B Part 2?
They're not, I promise you,
Whose listening was this?
Not one of ours. This,
Wow.
this actually was for a subdivision. They're trying to develop it into apartments. It's a mess. Yeah, it's ugly, 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 ugly. Okay, so top 10 common title issues. This goes back to why you want to buy title insurance. So when your client, your buyer is sitting there going, oh, I hate buying insurance. I just hate it so much. And you're telling me that part of my closing cost is an owner's policy. Why would I ever need one? There are times when you need it. As with all insurance, it's not a product just to, fleece the buyer a little more, just a little more. It actually does provide protection. So here's the top 10 common title issues. We got this list, and is this a similar list to what you handed out? Okay. It's similar to a handout you guys have. This came from a bunch of the title insurance underwriters. So the people who are actually paying claims, hiring attorneys to defend property owners against them. So number one, errors in the public records. Okay, I know that when I was young and learned what the county recorder's office was, when I was a young attorney, dealt with them a bunch, I thought, oh, they're the county recorder, they're infallible. They're perfect. They're amazing. Like they've got it down. They are not. They are not. They make errors from time to time or more. So they do make errors in the public records, meaning, okay, I have lien rights against Rick's property. I go down to the county recorder. I record my lien. I walk away going, Rick will never sell unless I get paid because I am now a lien holder and that escrow officer is going to have to call me and pay me before he can sell, right? The county recorder receives that lien and they put it on Leah's property accidentally, right? It's an accident. Now Rick goes to sell a month later. Title does their research, goes, no liens, done. A couple years later, go, whoa, where's my money, Rick? And Rick goes, I don't know. I filed a lien. I start to foreclose lien. Even though there was an error and it didn't show up on his property, I'm still coming after the property it was supposed to be recorded against to foreclose and collect my money. And I have represented creditors who have done this. And that poor innocent buyer goes, whoa, I paid, I bought, there was a title for what in the world? Now the insurance kicks in and pays for that. I go, okay, Rick. Okay, Sam, Rick owed you $5,000 and we issued a title policy. Here's your $5,000, right? Buyer is safe.
What about me?
Yeah, that's easy. Here's an easy one. I know, sorry. Here's an easy one. When it comes to you, it's an error. Again, it's an error in the public record. And you write me a letter and goes, hey, you recorded a lien against my house. I've never met you. What's going on? I look at it and go, oh, it's wrongful lien, release, done. You go to list and sell. Escrow officer calls and goes, hey, there's this lien. She has no idea who you are. Oh yeah, there must have been an error. Sometimes those errors are they don't record. They just don't record them. Yeah.
If this is too far off for the class today, we can talk about that. But right now, we're hearing a lot of the home title lock type thing, right? Where people are taking the equity on homes, so they're going to getting a loan on someone on Rick's property. His is all paid off, so let's go get a loan against Rick's property, and which then creates a false lien because I go do it and I go take the money and walk away. The question that often comes up is, well, whoever did the loan claiming to be Rick, and they did it in someone else's name and signed paperwork, whatever, where is the or the title company that closed the transaction, the lender that did the deal, where they didn't verify anything that I truly was Rick. Where would this fall into?
So that would
I
be,
know title insurance does not cover that, the fraud.
yeah, but if you were to falsely impersonate him, it covers that. If you were forging something, if you were like, no, I'm Rick, signed Rick. It covers that. There is some coverage there.
You want to talk about this whole title lock insurance that these companies that are now promoting that they do kind of like an identity theft protection
Yeah.
against the equity of your home.
Yeah.
This is we can talk about.
Yes.
this.
Yeah. But okay. So
And that does unfortunately happen. Kim came across a story among the 30 years where people own 15 rental properties free and clear. Someone came in, forged their signature, transferred title to them, and took out the homes of the property. And so they lost all 15 homes. It was a long battle.
millions of dollars.
Millions of dollars. So it's important to have this and to understand when it comes to play, because you may think, oh, that will never happen to me, but it can. And unfortunately it does. I actually see it quite often here in Utah where a title company will notarize a person with their nickname. Cool. Who are you? Your name is Jennifer, but you go by Nan, so you're signing by Nan. That's going to be an issue. That notary should never have notarized you in your nickname with no legal identification stating that your legal name is Nan. So that does become issues. There's multiple situations when that happens. Like if someone needs a gender change, and I have one in Escrow right now, and she wants to sign with her new name, but all her legal identity is in her old name. And so it's really hard. In title, we have to weigh that sensitivity aspect too. But just keep in mind, if you as a person see that your client is not just buying my nickname, highly advise them not to do that. Title, like I said, shouldn't notarize, but that's where you kind of see these issues here. Because if I am claiming to be Nan Cruz, but my last name is Cruz, and I'm like, that's my nickname, someone can sign the deed over to me. So that those things do happen, and that's why it's important to have title
So you're gonna
insurance.
go into extended policy, or is this?
no, we're just talking about how to handle. Look at the PR and talk to your client about that. Good one. That's on more extended policy.
Yeah, we can.
You have unloaned liens, so there are some types of liens that don't have to be recorded right away. Like I have a right to file a lien. I can wait up to 6 months. This is like contractors, material suppliers, wait up to 6 months to file a lien. Let's say you sell and close within that 6 months. That doesn't dissolve my lien right? So it covers against unknown liens, illegal deeds, missing deeds. This happens, right? Where, I'm going to deed Leah my property. I sign the deed, I give it to her, and she puts it in her drawer. Goes, it's mine now. And then I die, my heirs go, oh yes, payday. And they sell, oh, we missed that, but payday. They sell the property, and Leah shows up after she realizes, wait, what happened there? Sam died. This is my property. Sometimes those missing deeds will show up, right? Covers against that. Because we talked about forgeries and the false impersonations, covers against that. Undiscovered wills, right? So I'm the heir, and then the will shows up. There's all kinds of like things that happen. Again, I'd say it covers past events and future claims. All of this stuff we don't know about until after somebody buys something. So it's something that happens in, something in the past that affects your future right to ownership. And then the last one is these boundary/survey disputes. And I said, if we looked out the window, you're going to see stuff everywhere. This is from a real boundary survey. The thick black line is the surveyed boundary line. The X and thin line is the fence, right? And if you look at the measurement, it's 27 feet. If it was 2.7 inches, I wouldn't be showing you this because people are like, it's a couple inches. 27 feet's a whole other story, right? And people start to go, wait a minute. If I'm on this side of the fence, I go, I want my 27 feet back. And this happens quite frequently. So, if you want to protect your clients against that, get a survey and then call the title company. Go, hey, we've got a fence line issue. What can be done? I'm going to give you a picture. This is a real picture, and it's in Jeremy Ranch. Okay. The yellow lines are the boundary lines, and you can see where the houses are built. So,
So
remember
see,
that?
this one's being cut off. One over there is right
that was
in half.
half. The one on top's half. This guy happened to be one of those Esquires. And this was a ski bum. And this was my client, and they thought they owned, it's hard to see because it's kind of blurred, but there's a retaining wall right here, and they thought they owned to them. And this guy decided to be an Esquire and say, no, I actually own a piece of your garage. And so we had to go through and figure this out, right? It can be a mess. So there you go, a horror story in picture format. All right. Oh yeah.
Oh, yeah.
We'll just point out all the horrible things. All right. Any questions? Questions, concerns, comments, accolades?
So what about FERPTA and taking, does that come into play when the state and federal government leaves a property on the sale and FERPTA becomes an issue? Foreign seller leaves country.
Yeah, so you're talking about that.
It doesn't.
Taxation.
I'll give you a real,
Yeah.
for anybody out there who's going FERPTA, oh my gosh, what does that mean? So if you are not a citizen of the United States and you're selling property, the federal government taxes you, right? And if you don't pay it as the seller, guess who gets to pay it? The buyer. Because Uncle Sam does not care who pays, they just care they get paid, right? And it sounds so unfair to the buyer because it is so unfair to the buyer. So
Title though is responsible. So if a seller is a foreign person, we are responsible to collect 15% now, 15% of the gross proceeds from the seller, and then we help, submit everything to the IRS. But keep that in mind too. If you're representing a foreign seller, they don't file taxes here in the US, and they will lose 15% of their gross proceeds.
And the person who might be from Canada would be a foreign person. Yes, they don't have an accent.
we need to go through all foreigners.
Doesn't mean-
Yeah, so if they don't have a social security number, that's when that comes into play. It's very rare that happens, but it does, and like you said, it falls onto the buyer's responsibility. Title will help you, they'll go through all the documentation, how to submit it, and the whole 9 yards, but that's, I would probably say, 1 every 20 that I see that happen, if that. Those are not as common as you think. At least I haven't really seen one here in Utah. I've seen plenty in California, but not really here.
And I think, Rick, where you're going is that if the taxes don't get paid, then the federal government has tax lien rights against the property and will file a tax lien, which would show up. If there was a tax lien, it would show up on the title report. Would have to be repaid before title
And the
could
buyer would
transfer
have to
and the
pay
deal could close.
For the current owners.
Beyond,
not the
yeah,
house.
whoever.
But what if it showed up after the transaction was done? I mean, that's commonly what's gonna happen, right?
Yeah, because the feds will go, wait a minute.
Yeah, wait a minute, we need to pay.
So so
And then it shows
under
up.
FERPTA, which is short for the Foreign Investment Real Property Tax Act, the buyer would be liable. So, yeah, it's.
And we do, and just so everyone understands how title functions, to make sure title is clear, we pull it when we get the contract, we pull right before recording. So if there's anything that is recorded in between that period, we'll know. Another red flag that I've come across recently was the seller pulled out a second or a private mortgage that was leaning against property within 15 days of closing on the transaction to pay for their deposit on their new home. So then after closing, we got a call saying, hey, I never got paid. Your client didn't tell us that he, did anything in the last 30 days, because it can take counties 30 to 60 days to show proper title recording. So if you know your seller is pulling out money or did a recent refinance, that's also something that people have been doing in the last 60 days. To let title know so we're aware and we can ask the right questions. Yeah.
It can happen more with the foreign investment. With the foreign investments, when it comes to commercial, they typically set up business entities in the U.S. And then the business entity gets what's called an ITIN, an International Tax Identification Number. And they have to in order to operate. And so once they get that ITIN, they're basically, that's like a social security number for the business, and it doesn't really trigger.
Yeah.
It's pretty rare because I know there's a lot, there's a lot of Chinese investment happening right now in US commercial real estate because the returns are much higher than what they're getting in keeping their money in China. There's a lot of Chinese investment that flows through Canada, and it looks like Canadian investment in the US commercial real estate market. But they do typically, like a lot of the ones, at least I know of and hear about, they typically, there's, oh my gosh, so much federal law when it comes to this. There's actually an act that says if you're a foreign national and you will invest over $500,000 in US real estate, you get all kinds of special privileges from the US government. And so, but in order to do that, and that makes it really appealing for, oil tycoons in Russia and, manufacturing tycoons in China and all over the place. They want to put that $500,000 plus in the US because of all the perks and benefits. In order to do that, they have to do it through a US business entity with an ITIN number. And you're right, this is a lot of commercial. In fact, there's commercial real estate agents in almost every state that specialize in those type of investors because they know how to navigate all of the perks. That was one of Trump's big things. If you watched economic stuff when he was in, because he was like, hey, yeah, come invest in Trump Towers, foreigners, and I'm going to give you crazy benefits for doing that, right? So
Commercial properties are say 99.9% of the time they're owned by an entity.
yeah, it's
So
pretty
you
rare
don't really
that
see
perk
that.
that would kick in.
Any other questions?
About tax law and foreign investment. Yeah, way off track. So, that was a good question.
How much is your settlement fee?
So my
What's the
standard
good
settlement fee is $395. And then if there's, so it's a seller, we do a $75 fee for any loans on the property to remove, and there's $25 wire fee if they want to wire. And then on the buy side, it's still $395, $25 CPL, and on the purchase. And then $75 estimate for enforcement. And then if you guys need, we're working on our online calculator. Hoping it will be done by June, first week of June. A lot of coding that goes into that. We just put our final edits in, so that will be available online. So you just click pull a net sheet, but it takes about 2 minutes to do one for you. So you just email me the info and I can plug it in and send it over to you for listing ones. And then our title policies, like I said, we usually quote the Eagle policy, but there's multiple policies. If you come to me and say, hey, my seller needs every penny because let's say they're going through a bankruptcy or they're going to only pull out $20,000 out of their house, let me know. I'm able to work with you. If you're a first home buyer and if you're really pinching them, I can also work with you on that too.
Just as a caveat, if you do have a seller that's in that situation where they're trying to get less than an Eagle policy, you got to make sure the rep C states that the seller will be providing an Eagle policy.
Yeah.
So you've got to make sure that you change in an addendum the terms because otherwise the contract would be different. So make sure that you're on the same page if you're doing something.
Yeah,
like that.
and like we can discuss the options for people who need it. I'm sure we're gonna start seeing that a little bit more, especially because we've deferred their payments on their loans, because then they have to pay all of those payments when they go to sell at the end. So it may just throw them off a little bit, but we're willing to work with you. And if it's like a consistent client, so say a commercial client that you're constantly working with, we can work out a pricing too for that kind of specific client. Any other questions? No? Sweet. Well, thank you guys.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.